America over English. Real Ethiopian, me no British, go tell them. Grrrma wheat, etegremenen. Hamarina kwanka fidel teach my children. Them teach me English, Amharic is my preference. When my heights and my black my reverence. About touching no, best man, ye me nor. See me, ye can desmond gish teeth in talk. Before the best man, ye in the own in the ube me dear. Tihun ye let in jara, chinin. Satin zare. Kai mok is sat, it's hot. Lion voice, one voice, and the lion voice. Time for the lion and the lioness voices to be heard. Log in and don't log off. Lion voice, Queasy, one. Lion voice, I hit.
I will never stop, hail the Most High, and I will never stop, call Ras Tafari. Blessed love, this is Kushite representing for the Lion's Voice. We are here to tell our own story, Ras Tafari.
Yeah. I shall lift up eyes unto the hills from whence cometh I help.
Okay, so after the Battle of Maichu, the Ethiopian government ministers have sat down 24 ministers, and 21 of those ministers vote for their emperor to leave Ethiopia to go and speak to the League of Nations. And so the emperor, he doesn't want to do that. He has made preparations to ignore those government ministers and to move his government further south. But he's seen being counseled by the empress that this would be the best decision. So the emperor, against his judgment, has decided to leave Ethiopia. And he arrives in Britain, has this overwhelming reception from the British people.
Let's stick a pin. Let's stick a pin because we're going to bubble this pot nicely.
The year is 1892, and the land of Ethiopia has been experiencing 4 years of terrible famine and drought. They call it the Kikuken, or the evil days. At least 1/3 of the human population and 90% of the cattle have died. The hyenas have feasted on so many carcasses that they have become overweight and barely able to move. Just when the people could take no more of the evil days, a woman named Wasiro Yeshimabet is giving birth in a place called Ergersa Gora. This is her 9th attempt to bring forth new life. Her previous 8 attempts only resulted in death. Will this child live? Thankfully, a healthy baby boy is born. His first cries are drowned by thunder and lightning flashes across the night sky. The heavens open up and torrential rain starts to fall. Ethiopia's drought is over, and the baby boy is given the name Tafari, meaning one to be feared or respected. Tafari's father, Ras Benji, is a very important man in 1892 Ethiopia. Although he is overjoyed at the birth of his newborn son, he cannot spend much time with him. Ras Benji is the governor of Harar and must get back to the famous walled city to deal with its affairs. Furthermore, he is the foreign minister of Ethiopia, and having traveled to different places in Europe, he is very aware of the material and military advances they have made and the looming threats they pose to his country. Ras Benji knows that the majority of Ethiopians have no idea what is coming, and that he has to work that much harder to secure the realm. Tafari would grow up to become the legendary emperor, Haile Selassie I. To understand his journey, we must first understand the Ethiopia that he was inheriting, and what it was like when he was born in 1892. Get your copy of Kwesi Bansu's book, Haile Selassie I, Ethiopia, Volume 1, The Rise of the Priestly Warrior Kings, and increase your knowledge about the history, politics, and culture of Ethiopia in 1892, and how it connects to the rest of African and world history at the time. Haile Selassie I, Ethiopia, Volume 1 is available for purchase at www.bookmanexpress.pub. Please visit for more information.
Let us talk about Fairfield House. For those who are not familiar with Fairfield House, why is Fairfield House important? How does Fairfield House factor into Rastafari history?
Okay, so Fairfield House was home of His Majesty and his family, the Ethiopian royal family, from 1936 to the Emperor left in 1940, the Empress and left in 1941. His sons also left in 1940, but some of his daughter, Princess Tananyawak, stayed there until 1943. So that was 7 years that this is their personal property. And longer than that as well, because the emperor, after he left, he gave permission for it to be as an orphanage, as a place for children that had lost their homes. Okay. And then he returned in 1954, 70 years ago this year, had a big reception, a very warm welcome, and back into the city of Bath. And then it was a few years after that he started beginning the motions to gift his home as a gift to the city of Bath. And that was for the good of the elderly, which is still the primary purpose today. But the house has transformed from being a residential care home to a day center for the elderly, to a day center for the elderly that also embraces the Rastafari worship, the Ethiopian community gatherings, and the heritage and the history of the emperor as well. So for Rastafari, it's actually about 50 plus years. 1972, I've interviewed an elder. He said that he was there at Fairfield House waiting in the garden because the emperor had returned to Britain and he thought that he might come to his home. So he had gathered a few Rastafari brethren and they were staying, they were just waiting for the emperor in the garden there. But he didn't actually visit Bath on that journey. But I was able to get a really good account of, some community activity at the house in expectation of meeting the emperor also.
Wow. So take us into that journey, 1936. Set the context, set the scene. Let us bubble the pot because we're going to go into this period of exile, the works that were taking place while he was at Bath, because of works, the autobiography, of course, being, one of the seminal works that took place there at Bath. Also, the translation of his Bible and the New Testament, I believe, was translated into Amharic during that period. The coordination of supplies and things to the guerrilla fighters in Ethiopia, the patriots. His Majesty was coordinating these things. So take us forward to 1936 and the exile.
Okay, so after the Battle of H.I.M, the Ethiopian government ministers have sat down 24 ministers, and 21 of those ministers vote for their emperor to leave Ethiopia to go and speak to the League of Nations. And so the emperor, he doesn't want to do that. He has made preparations to ignore those government ministers and to move his government further south. But he's seen, being counseled by the empress, that this would be the best decision. So the emperor, against his judgment, has decided to leave Ethiopia. And he arrives in Britain, has this overwhelming reception from the British people.
Let's stick a pin. Because we're going to bubble this pot nicely. Why the emperor was hesitant is because, knowing Ethiopian history, knowing that no emperor has ever left the country in a time of war, he knows that this is going to be a major blow to the legacy, major blow to how he perceives his enemies who have been waiting for opening. This is going to be a major opening for the enemies of the progress, because a lot of people were anti the progress and the reforms that Haile Selassie was bringing to the table. So he knows, And this is why these ministers had to overwhelmingly make the case, and then also Empress Menen, as you rightly said. But the historical weight of that decision, I think, and even Marcus Garvey, this was one of the things that he was attacked by Marcus Garvey and others, of his decision to leave. But that decision is prophetic, because now he becomes the first head of state to address the nation, to cast judgment, according to their own covenant and the covenant of the nations to affect a global peace among themselves, and the violation of that covenant, smiting them with a double-edged sword, which comes from his mouth. But continue. I just want to make sure that the people understand the weight of some of these, because this is the low point, and we all go through our low points in life. So I want, especially the young races, to understand what the emperor went through. Continue.
Yeah, that was perfect, and please just keep adding the color, to that. You said it perfectly. So the emperor, he goes to Geneva, and he speaks to the League of Nations, and this is one of the most prophetic, if not the most prophetic, address in world history. This is the moment that 80 million lives could have been saved, that World War II. This is where it all could have been different at that moment, at that juncture, at the League of Nations. So the emperor's speaking for his defenseless people, and he gives great detail about what's happening to them. And this, is very impactful for the head of state for a first time to address a council of the nations of the world. But also unprecedented because of the sheer color that he's giving to this rumors of war that everyone's been hearing. And then all of a sudden, the emperor of that people, the representative of that people, is there telling you about the horrific barbarism that's taking place by the Italians on the Ethiopian people. So the emperor, he doesn't get the answer that he wants at the League of Nations. There's just a handful of small states that are protesting in favor of Ethiopia. So he knows he has to come into exile for a longer period of time. And he knows he must work now. He's got political work to do to save Ethiopia. And he sees clearly because he's strategically looking at a map of Africa, and he sees on his borders, Ethiopia is this only island, independent country in Africa. But on his borders, as advised by Lorenzo Tazaz, particularly you can see in the Emperor's autobiography, he says exactly what is going to happen. He is saying that Italy will side with Germany, and we must drag the British government into the war on a moral argument to help our people. And this is the only hope for Ethiopia to be saved, So the emperor, he's in Britain, but he's now embarrassing the British government because that he wants help from, because they're appeasing Mussolini. And there is a fascist idea in Britain, as well as the anti-fascists and the people that responded to the peace poll that wanted peace and collective security at the League of Nations. There is also a fascist element and sympathizes with Italy. And at that time, that's where the British government is placed, although they just sort of sit on the fence in terms of recognition of the emperor or not recognizing him. But they're definitely beginning to speak with Italy as that representative of Ethiopia. Even at the League of Nations, there's a difficult situation for the emperor during that time. So he is advised and makes a decision to leave London, and he wants to visit a spa town in Britain. And this is because he's got mustard gas burns on his arms. It's causing great irritation for him and members of his party. And the city in the West Country that he goes to, Bath, this is known for its healing water. It's so-called Bath because of the hot springs in the city. And it was an important site before the Romans, but the Romans built these magnificent baths for the hot spring water. So the emperor was treated at the mineral hospital, and he liked it so much in Bath, and the reception and the privacy that he was afforded, he decided to make it his home. So he purchased a house called Fairfield House with his personal funds, £3,500. And so the family moved in after there was a little bit of refurbishment in the property. And then that begins that period of exile.
Well, for unto us a son was born and a child was given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called the Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Them call him Ras Tafari. When he was born, rain fall from the sky. Them call him Ras Tafari. When he was grown, in airplanes he fly. They call him Ras Tafari. The lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Them call him Ras Tafari. Read your Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Then born near the city of Harar, the inspiration for Bob Marley's guitar. People crowd him like some big superstar. It no matter if England or Cote d'Ivoire, no matter if you're brown or black like Qatar. Haile Selassie say fi end all tribal war. A time fi gather Mount Zion, fi drive solar car from the car straight to Zanzibar. Who we are, the sons of Ras Tafari. When he was born, rain fall from the sky. Ras Tafari. When he was grown, in airplanes he fly. Then Ras Tafari. The lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Then Ras Tafari. Read your Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Royal governor from the age of 13 years, leave the palace fi go back in a school with him peers. He's the head without fear, he's one to be revered. When them call his name, then the heathen scare. Plus the priest concerned, and him teachers concerned, cause all this little youth want fi do is just learn. But he wait his turn, till him turn the chance match. The people rejoice when him crown as the Ras they call him Ras Tafari. When he was born, rain fall from the sky. Then Ras Tafari. When he was grown, in airplanes he fly. Then Ras Tafari. The lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Then Ras Tafari. Read your Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Well, Ras Makonnen call a meeting with all him general them. Say him funeral a come, and him have something fi tell them. Him say, we fight together since the days of Adawa. Him say, protect my son and help him unite Africa. Well, him generals, them start cry when them hear this sound. Them say your wishes are come and then bow down to the ground. When him funeral they come, it shock the whole town. Fi see this little youth, him have a army surround, they call him